Anne Marie, it is such a pleasure to have you on the Books for Guys podcast today. How are you this week?
Uh, It's been a great week so far, and this just adds to it. I live in northern Ontario. We have about 7-foot snowbanks, but today the sun is shining and the icicles are melting, so hints of spring are on their way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm ready for spring.
Me too.
I'm in Nashville, and we went through some pretty horrific ice and snow and all of it. It's 75 today though. So,
Wow.
yeah, I am ready for greenery. I am ready for we were talking about basketball when we first got on. I'm ready for March Madness. I'm ready for
Yes,
everything that March can bring. So, I'm with you. I'm ready for spring weather.
I am too. Our spring will be a little bit later than yours, unfortunately, this year.
It'll be there soon enough, and you'll be able to enjoy it. But, um, Anne Marie, again, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and really thank you for taking the time to do this. And I was learning a little bit about you before coming on here, and just your story of you always knew you wanted to be an author. It just took a little longer than you had planned.
Quite a bit longer. When I was 8, I said to my parents I wanted to be an author. My dad brought up his old-fashioned hand-picking typewriter for me to use, and I wrote the darkest poetry you'd ever wanna like, I can't imagine what was going through my 8-year-old head, but life was dark apparently.
Yeah.
And then in high school, I wrote short stories and then decided I wanted to go into social work. And somehow the whole creative part of my brain shut off for decades until I retired from the local university where I'd been a professor. And then COVID happened. We were in lockdown. And I was going a little bit squirrely, as I call it. And I pulled out a laptop. I thought I'd journal. But the first thing that I wrote said, when she awoke, it was with such joy in her heart. That was the start of my first book, Spindrifts. And I thought, what? And so I had to go for a long walk. We weren't supposed to walk, so I had to go around the block. And I thought, well, maybe it's time. And away I went.
Yeah.
And my more recent book, Fugitive Rifts, published last July, is the third book that I've written.
Yeah. I was just about to say, so you've now published 3 books since 2020,
Since 2021,
since 2021.
I
Yeah.
had to write the first one before I
Yeah.
could, and I've self-published.
Yeah. How does it feel after going so long with not writing and not feeling like you had that creativity driving this? What is that feeling like over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years to where you've been able to put these books out there? Just what's that like?
It connects me with my childhood in ways that kind of surprised me. I worked all of my adult life and spent close to 40 years at the local university in a variety of jobs. And of course, part of an academic's job is writing, but it's very different writing than creative writing. It's the opposite. So I gave a draft of my first book to some friends from a book club, and they gently told me, which I think was trying to spin it a little bit, that it read like an academic paper. And while I was a bit shattered, I'm really grateful to them
For that feedback?
because I had to kind of figure out what they meant and fix it. And obviously hired editors and all the things that every publisher do to polish a book. I use a place called Friesen Press as a one-stop for everything that I need with my books, and we have a good partnership.
Yeah. I was gonna ask that leads me to a good question. I was gonna ask just your experience in learning how to publish a book and get it written, get it edited. Did you know all the steps, or was it kind of like, all right, I gotta figure out what to do now. I need to figure out how to get like this out there. What was that whole experience like?
It was very naive. I'm writing a book, I'll get it published somehow, and then I can stop. That was my thought. And then I went to a virtual, well-known writers' workshop at Humber College in the summer of 2020. And they had people there that said traditional publishing, if you don't have magazine articles and this and that, you're talking 10 years, you're talking 5 years to get an agent. I'm retired, right? I'm of a certain age, and I thought, I don't have time for that. So I Googled that night how to get a book published, and Prison Press popped up. I got a phone call, soft sell kind of thing. We kept in touch, and they trained me about the whole process. And I was gobsmacked, actually, that I had to be part of the whole thing. And the promotions person was setting me up on social media. I had Facebook for relatives. I had Instagram with maybe 100 followers. I was nervous about it and got guided all the way through and convinced that I had to do it. And now I feel quite on top of that. But the initial was complete naivety about what I was getting into. And now I feel very comfortable. And I've kind of spent time with new authors recently and sort of gave them some handy hints, as an old prof used to say. But I love it. I love what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's awesome. I've learned so much about the process myself. I haven't written a book. I just enjoy these conversations and talking with others who have written them. But there's so many different ways and routes you can go in working to get your book published, whether that be
Mm,
traditional or self-publishing, and having good people help you along the way seems to make a big difference, as it can be quite confusing. It sounds like, just knowing what you need to do and to market,
yeah.
and just who can print it, and does it, does it go on Amazon? Does it go here? There's so many things that I've never thought about until having these conversations. So it's just kind of mind blowing, honestly, how much it takes to get your work out there.
It is, and by going through a place like I have, they do all that. They're like a staff and mentors at the same time for doing things that all publishers pay people to do. And the product, in my opinion, and I think I'm fussy, is very, very good. So without them, I'd still be fumbling around. I hadn't really heard of self-publication. I'd still be fumbling around trying to look for a publisher with the first book.
Yeah. Do you think, and you mentioned you kind of credit COVID and being in lockdown for the opportunity to start writing again and putting this out there. Obviously, there's a lot of negative things that came from COVID, but
Yeah.
this is a positive one for you. And I guess my question is, do you think without COVID that there was a chance for you to write any of these stories, or do you think without that happening, you may still not have any books out?
I think there's a chance because had a lot of time on my hands when I first retired, but I think it's highly unlikely I would have written. What impelled me to write was how dark the world seemed, and all my books have a theme of hope in them. But the first one, I built a world that I wanted to live in, and I'd escape there for like 12 hours a day. If I didn't have a dog who needed exercise, I probably would have worked longer. And I have a very supportive partner who handled the household things and would call me in and say, "You got to eat now."
Yeah.
But it just poured out of me, that story. I read each of my books at least once a year to go visit my characters in those worlds.
Yeah. That is so cool that you've had that support to be able to. I mean, you sounds like you got locked in and you were like, "I'm
Yeah,
all in now, and I'm
yeah.
creating something," and you had a mission and, you and a support system to help you accomplish that, which is
Mhm.
really cool. Just especially, again, knowing your your career and story and just knowing that may not have happened, again, without some
Correct.
inspiration with COVID and the way the world was. And so talk a little bit about your latest book, Anne Marie, though, Fugitive Rifts, which came out just this past summer. Yeah. And we've got it on the Books for Guys website for
I
anyone to
saw
go
that.
find it. Yeah. So if
Thank
anyone's
you.
interested, but talk about your process and just how you came up. I don't want to give too much away, but the four characters who just, get invited to be a part of the debate team, just talk about where that idea came from and how you put that together.
So I'm a pantster, like total pantster. Even when I think I'm planning a scene, the characters will kind of sabotage it, and I wind up doing something completely different. This book is not part of the other two books that are connected but could be read separately. I wanted to try something a bit more contemporary and not 50 to 70 years in the future. So it starts in 25, 26 and does go about 10 years into the future as we watch these four characters. Each has a huge challenge that changes their life. At the beginning of the book, they talk about their dreams, and they all wind up in very different places because of a crisis or a challenge or something that they couldn't have anticipated. And what I wanted to do with this book actually matches things that you say. The debate club is a vehicle to present different ideas about things, about social issues and environmental issues. So the book isn't saying, climate change is real, climate change is false. The characters debate that, and they debate about unhoused people, and they debate about better ways to support people who are marginalized in our current world. And there's a lot of discussion about that. And the arc for each character as they mature takes them from a lot of naivety and some intelligence and big dreams. One wants to go pro in basketball, another one's a phenomenal skier. Third one's kind of a nerdy, wants to be a scientist and do something transformative. And the fourth one's a deep thinker who had some a significant family issues with the death of somebody during the pandemic that he was close to. And each of those events shape them, but their crises move them in different directions. They initially think they don't really have anything in common. And I certainly we moved around a lot as a child, and, you walk in the room and you look at somebody in the classroom and you think, "They're not my kind of people." But if you take the time to get to know them, you often find you have a lot in common, and you can become really good friends. So I wanted that to be a piece of the book as well. It's quite an interesting ride, and those same friends that were kind to me at the first book have said, "Okay, your writing's great in this one. Keep going."
Yeah, you're getting it now.
So I learned,
Yeah.
and I think it's a book that ultimately at the end of it, some people will say disagree with that world, but they've at least experienced something to react against, and other people might be inspired to pick up some of the things and think of what's one thing I can do to transform lives, which is exactly what you're doing through your reading program. You've figured out a niche of something that's meaningful to you. And I'm quite confident you're transforming lives with it. It's hard to take on the whole world, but each of us can take on a piece that we feel really passionate about. I do it through writing, and you do it through podcasting and reaching out to coaches. And it's just an amazing thing you're doing as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words, Anne Marie. It means a lot, and we are trying to do some impactful things and hopefully create a positive difference in the
Mhm,
world by doing so and having these conversations. And I like one of the themes of your book, and just even in the summary about how they realize they're more alike than they are
mhm,
different. And I love talking with people about that because I'm a big just proponent of that phrase and that thought, as we as people are a lot more alike than we are different. We kind of get in this social media or news, we kind of get pulled and told we're different and we should be against each other in certain ways and things. But it's you're right, when you end up talking with someone or sitting down spending time, you end up thinking, oh, we got a lot more in common than we thought.
yeah.
It is such a positive thing to experience, and so I think it's really a great thing that you incorporated that in this book.
I think that it's a common journey that most people at some point get to know somebody at a deeper level and think, I never thought we'd get along. And their politics might be different, their social standing might be different, but there's a deeper connection that when you look at the superficial, you don't see it. But when you take the time to, as you put on your website, take the time to listen and engage in respectful dialogue, you find some meeting of minds over some issues.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's why I think your book highly recommended, and
Thank you.
I think a lot of people will enjoy reading it because I love the fact too that it's a fiction book, so it's something you can get lost in, take a break from the everyday just focus you've got to have in different areas of life, and so I've become a huge proponent of reading fiction, but I love how fiction books can have some underlying messages that still make you think
Mhm.
and better yourself. So it's enjoyable while also like taking something from it, which is something I'm a big fan of when I'm reading fiction. And your book seems to be exactly that. So I'm excited to read it, and I think other people will too.
Well, thank you. This book kind of flowed more easily for me, and the writing time for it was shorter. For all I'm a pantser, I didn't know what was going to happen to each of them, but I thought one person was going to be challenged and then the other ones would kind of help out, but they each face a challenge. And then I'm left with where do I take this in the last third of the book to wrap it up? And so that took a little bit of trying something and then thinking, no, that's not going to work. And then all of a sudden one day it just flowed. And then at the last minute, I reorganized the book so there are flashbacks. It was originally going to be just lateral time beginning to end, but there's flashbacks, and I think that helps.
Adds to it. Yeah. I love that. Are you, I mean, you've written 3 books now in the last 4 or 5 years. Are you working on any other projects currently?
So it's kind of funny, after each book, I've said, "I'm done." And so after this one, I said to my partner, "Well, I'm gonna keep marketing, I'm going to keep doing this, but I think I'm done writing." And I thought he was going to say, "Oh, good, now we can do more together." And he went, "Why?" He said, "It engages you, you love doing it. What are you gonna do, sit around all day?" And I thought, "Okay."
Good point.
Um, in this book, Fugitive Rifts is a minor, but I think significant character, and I love her, and she drew some of my best writing, and at the end of the book, it ends well in fitting with her story, but there's still a whole bunch of things we don't know. So I'm about 10,000 words into Alice's search for her early childhood and later memories. She only remembers her life when she kind of came to on the streets in Vancouver. Fugitive Rifts takes place in British Columbia, Canada, for reasons to do with their landscape. And so I still have no clue what's happened to her. Um, but we're discovering things At the end of the book, she knew one thing about her childhood. And so we're bringing that into fuller focus in those 10,000 pages. But there's about 30 years or 25 years that she's missing, and I have to figure out what that's about.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting to know you are working on something else and more projects that we'll be able to dive into and read and keep the story going per se. And so I'm excited that you have decided to continue writing
Well,
and,
thank
and
you.
putting stories out there. So, a couple more questions for you, Anne Marie. First off, I ask most people on the podcast this question, and that's just your personal book recommendations. What are some books that have meant a lot to you, and what do you like to recommend to other people when they ask?
I think the book that changed my life from writer to social work was in grade 6. We read age-appropriate version of Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and I was shocked at the idea that in the late 19th century, people would be hung for stealing food to feed their family in a world where there was so much rich and so much horrible poverty. And so that's a book that really affected me. A series for anybody who likes epic fantasy is by another Canadian author called P.L. Stewart, Stuart. And it's called The Drowned Kingdom Saga. It's phenomenal. I just finished reading his 6th book in the saga. There's 7, one more to come. And he told me that he's a plotter and that he plotted the details of all these books, and they're huge volumes. And he's been able to somehow keep track of things that he wrote 6 books ago. And so I've said to him, I don't do podcasts as the interviewer, but I want to go in your podcast and interview you about this. And we'll do that at some point. I read every day, and I read for pleasure, and I read all kinds of things. A book that affected me and pulled emotions, like I cried all through it, is Shelley Reid's book, Go as the River. And it's a simple book. It's very readable. And by about page 5, I found myself crying and thinking, how is she pulling this out of me? I recommended it to a sister, and a couple of days later, she wrote, bawling my eyes out. It's very emotional. It's very simple. I'm not so much sure that it's a guy's story, but there are certainly elements and very interesting characters who are men
Interesting.
and young men. It's hard to pick because like I read several books a week.
Yeah. It's a tough question when you read a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, well, that's awesome. I'll have to add those to my list. I'm constantly adding to my want to read list, and so I will add those as well. The last question for you, Anne Marie, and this one's a fun one, just because we were talking a little bit before we got on here, was just your love for basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned you were following Michigan women's team. You have some family members that are playing right now, and so wanted just to ask you, where did your love of basketball come from? And just kind of, where did you talk about following Michigan's team now? Do you have a favorite team that you normally follow or kind of change it up?
Well, my first team is Laurentian University Voyageurs women and men's teams. That's the university where I work. They have games. It's like a 10-minute drive, and we're solid fans. My partner and I actually met courtside.
Wow. That's
And
really cool.
that's a whole other funny story. But basketball, at one point, I was a dean of the Faculty of Professional Schools, and the Human Kinetics program was part of that. And as part of my job, it's hard for me to say this without laughing. I was in charge of intercollegiate athletics. And I laugh because I can barely chew gum and walk, but I was a very good administrator with an excellent director. He ran things by me, but I never really had to do very much, very competent. And before that, I had been going to games as a student when I was there, and then later on, there's just something about the game that I really like. And I follow Michigan because Silas Swords is from Sudbury, and her dad was the coach of the men's team for years when I was in in charge. And I'll have to be watching Kentucky next year because Savannah Swords is going to be going there. Um, and then two of our grandkids are basketball players and doing very well, as one's 11, the other's 13. And we go to a lot of those games as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. When I saw that you were such a big basketball fan, I was like, I've got to ask her some basketball questions. As I was telling you, my wife and I, we watch basketball every single night, whether we're going to a game or watching on TV. We live for both men's and women's basketball. We watch it all and huge fans. And so it's really cool to talk with you and just learn more about why you love the game as well. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote a character in Fugitive Rifts who's a basketball player. And when I was thinking of the coach that affected her positively, I kept thinking of our women's basketball coach at Laurentian. And finally, I contacted him and said, "Can I use your name?"
Yeah.
So he's in the book because he did allow me to use the name, and he's a nice coach, so
Yeah.
that's good.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. This has been a fantastic conversation and can't wait for everyone to watch and listen. And hopefully, a lot of people go and get your book because it sounds incredible. Again, the lessons, the characters, I think there's a lot from it. And again, I'm so happy that you're continuing to write and you've got some more work that will be coming out at some point in the future. And can't wait to see what that is, and we'll certainly be ready to spotlight that work as well. Thank you again so much, Anne Marie. This has been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure for me as well, Chris. Thank you so much for inviting me on.